This week on Jerusalem Dateline, a tug of war between nations emerges after the U.S. decides to pull its troops out of northeast Syria. Who will control this strategic Middle East territory? Plus, the World Council of Churches sends hundreds of volunteers to Israel and the West Bank. What's their agenda? And Israel as the good neighbor, how the IDF reached out to Syrians caught in the middle of the Syrian civil war. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. A suicide bomber killed 19 people in Syria, including 4 U.S. servicemen on patrol. The attack provoked various messages to President Trump about his decision to pull U.S. troops out of Syria. ISIS claimed responsibility for the blast caught here on security camera footage in the Syrian town of Manbij. After the attack, Senator Lindsey Graham interrupted the confirmation hearing of William Barr to make a direct plea to President Trump.
My concern by the statements made by President Trump is that you'd set in motion enthusiasm by the enemy we're fighting. You make people we're trying to help wonder about us. And as they get bolder, the people we're trying to help are going to get more uncertain.
Graham said he recently had a meeting at the same restaurant with Kurds, Arabs, and Christians who hope to establish a democratic government in northeast Syria.
So I would hope the president would look long and hard at where he's headed in Syria. I know people are frustrated, but we're never going to be safe here unless we're willing to help people over there who will stand up against this radical ideology.
In Ankara, Turkey's President Erdogan sent a different message to President Trump. Don't stop the pullout.
The attack could have the aim of influencing the decision that America took, that Mr. Trump took. But because I saw Trump's determination to withdraw, I believe that he will not take a step back in the face of such an act of terror.
Trump's announcement to pull out of Syria has provoked a tug of war over who will control northeast Syria. While Erdogan wants Turkey to control a 20-mile security zone, Russia's foreign minister pushed back on Turkey's land grab.
We believe that the optimal and only right solution is transferring these Syrian territories from when the United States troops leave to the control of the Syrian government, Syrian armed forces, and Syrian administrative bodies.
But critics warn if the Syrian government of Bashar Assad resumed control of northeast Syria, it would open a door to Iranian influence. With all of these competing interests, Turkey, Russia, Syria, Iran, and the U.S., a new Middle East is emerging, and it remains to be seen who will shape its destiny. Here in Israel, in a rare admission, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Israel attacked an Iranian military target in Syria. The strike is part of an ongoing struggle by Israel to eliminate the threat from Iran, just miles from Israel's northern border. After the strike, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu toured the Golan Heights and explained why Israeli warplanes hit this Iranian target.
In the past 48 hours, Israel attacked an Iranian weapons warehouse at the international airport in Damascus. This reflects our consistent policy and strong determination to prevent Iran from entrenching itself militarily in Syria. If necessary, we will step up these attacks.
Syrian state television said Syria air defenses shot down a number of Israeli missiles. Israel's outgoing chief of staff also said Israel had dropped 2,000 bombs on targets inside Syria just last year. Netanyahu also revealed that Israel destroyed the final tunnel dug by Hezbollah into Israel.
This brings Operation Northern Shield to a successful close. We'll continue to monitor all activity by Hezbollah, by Iran, and its proxies. We'll do whatever is necessary to ensure the security of Israel.
In the meantime, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo concluded his multi-nation tour of the Middle East. The trip was designed to forge an alliance against Iran and assure allies the U.S. is not leaving the Middle East, even though President Trump announced the pullout of U.S. troops from Syria. Pompeo told CBS's Face the Nation the pullout won't change the main U.S. mission.
The counterterrorism mission, the effort to make sure that the destruction of ISIS is not only complete, but that the resurgence is not possible, our efforts to counter the threat from terrorism stemming from the Islamic Republic of Iran. Those are all real missions. The tactical change we've made and the withdrawal of those 2,000 troops is just that, a tactical change. Mission remains the same.
Some in northeast Syria see the U.S. pullout as a betrayal of the Kurds. But this official says the U.S. promised to guarantee the safety of the people in the area.
The American leaders were very honest and clear in their decisions, that there will be no withdrawal without the accomplishment of all these tasks, especially in the issue of protecting the area in northeastern Syria and the negotiations or the discussion that was made between Bolton and the Turkish administration, that there will be no withdrawal until the safety of this area was guaranteed.
The pullout leaves many nations vying for dominance inside northeast Syria. The stakes are high. Pompeo's Mideast tour and what happens on the ground inside Syria will help shape the future for millions of people in the region. Up next, hundreds of volunteers tied to the World Council of Churches spread throughout the West Bank with what some call a hidden agenda. The World Council of Churches calls itself broad and exclusive with a goal of Christian unity. A new report also claims the organization is behind a program to train young people as observers in the West Bank and then send them home as anti-Israel advocates.
This effort is called the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel, or EAPPI. The World Council of Churches started the program in 2002. Since then, it's sent some 1,800 volunteers to the West Bank to witness what it calls life under occupation. These volunteers then head home to tell churches, congregations, and others about it. Those presentations often take a very negative and even anti-Semitic tone.
It has got nothing to do with it. It is mainly a political warfare. It is mainly driven by the Zionists. It is a Zionist ideology to try and drive every Palestinian out of that land to create a Jewish state.
The WCC denounces anti-Semitism as a sin against God, and spokesperson Peter Prove tells CBN News that the program is all about human rights.
The ultimate purposes of the program are to address human rights violations, impacts upon human dignity, and to promote, on the positive side, a just peace for both peoples.
A report by the NGO Monitor, however, paints a different picture of these so-called training camps.
And that is the main tool for training anti-Israel activists within church organizations and churches around the world. And it's also the main tool for inserting anti-Israel and anti-Zionist propaganda and rhetoric into those same churches.
According to Prove, the volunteers take part in everyday life with the Palestinians.
They're there to provide a protective presence. Secondly, they're there to observe, monitor, and report on events that they observe.
Jonas Schiffmiller said, NGO Monitor found there's more to the story.
In fact, what EAPPI is really doing is coming here, gaining credibility for themselves to go back to their home churches and to spread anti-Israel diatribes.
Yosef Daher is coordinator of the Jerusalem Center that hosts the volunteers. He explains how they view Jesus' command to love your enemies.
We look at the Israelis, of course, back home as our enemy. And we see that our enemy is in a sin against God and against humanity. And in order to show our love, if you love someone, you would love him to be free of his sin. So this is where we connected love with resistance.
Resistance usually refers to terrorism, but Daher said as Christians they only promote boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, or BDS. In response to the report, the WCC said it only promotes boycotting goods from Israeli settlements. That's not Daher's view.
The call for sanctions is targeted at Israel.
The WCC recognizes Israel's right to exist according to international law, but doesn't connect it to the Bible. Dr. Robert Smith works with the volunteers and explained it earlier.
The biblical narrative of Israel has almost nothing to do with contemporary Israel other than the intentional manipulation of sacred text to justify a political project. The Global Kairos movement declared that any Christian theology that supports Zionism is heresy.
David Parsons is vice president of the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. He described the 2009 Cairo's Palestine Declaration as misguided.
For someone to brand Christian Zionism heresy, this is troubling ground because Jesus himself affirmed the restoration of Israel in Matthew 19. The Apostle Peter does it in Acts chapter 3, and Paul does it in Romans chapter 11. So these were all affirming a belief in biblical Zionism, the belief that the Jews would be restored to the land.
Funding for the volunteer training program comes from the World Council of Churches as well as European governments. NGO Monitor would like those countries to reevaluate that support and the WCC to recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state.
A global movement targeting Israel's economy is at the heart of a debate in the U.S. Congress. Democrats recently blocked legislation supporting the Jewish state. They claim it's because of the government shutdown. But one Republican senator believes there's another reason Democrats won't pass the bill. He says a growing number of their members are anti-Israel. Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson brings us more from Washington.
There's a growing anti-Israel movement known as the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions, or BDS, and Senator Marco Rubio is alarmed the effort's support is spreading to the U.S.
BDS is a movement around the world to get companies, pressure companies to boycott Israel, meaning not do business there, divest from any investments in Israel or Israeli companies, and to get governments to sanction Israel.
Currently, those behind BDS target companies like Ahava, Caterpillar, HP, and Sabra Hummus, hoping to isolate Israel academically, culturally, economically, and militarily.
It is an anti-Semitic movement.
Joel Griffith of the Heritage Foundation calls it a threat to Israel's security.
Israel, it's a beacon of democracy. It's an area where religious minorities and ethnic minorities enjoy equal rights. And yet that is the country that these individuals have chosen to target. The end goal, as stated by their founder, Omar Barghouti, is the end of the Jewish state of Israel.
Protesters boast their campaigns have cost Israeli companies billions due to lost contracts and major shareholders divesting.
I'm concerned that we're seeing for the first time at least 2 House members that are openly pro-BDS.
They would be newly elected representatives Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. Tlaib recently told The Intercept she believes the boycotts bring attention to issues like the racism and the international human rights violations by Israel. Senator Rubio included a Combating BDS Act in the first bill the Senate is taking up this year.
We have a law that says that states and local governments can decide not to do any work, meaning no contracts for goods or services with companies that are boycotting or divesting from Israel.
Democrats keep blocking it, however, saying they won't consider any bills unrelated to opening the government. Rubio thinks there's another reason.
I think they're blocking it because they're afraid of radical elements in their own base. There's a growing group of people in the Democratic Party that are anti-Israel openly, and I think they're afraid of them.
Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, a staunch supporter of Israel, did not answer CBN News' question about his thoughts on the Democrats who openly support the BDS movement. But he did say this about the Combating BDS Act.
I am a co-sponsor, so I've supported it all along.
Congresswoman Tlaib says she plans to go against tradition and lead a House delegation to which she refers to as the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Historically, freshman lawmakers have been invited to spend a week meeting with Israeli leaders.
Coming up, Israel chooses to be a good neighbor to Syrians caught in the chaos of the Syrian civil war. For several years, the Israel Defense Forces reached out to thousands of Syrians when these Syrians were caught up in the crossfire of the brutal and deadly Syrian civil war. Many Christians would recognize the name of this operation. They called it the Good Neighbor Policy. How did the Good Neighbor Policy get started?
The Good Neighboring Policy started when the IDF understand there is other challenges from the quiet border, from 73 till 2011. Something has been changed in Syria and affects Israel. We've understand that radical Islam groups are living just next to our border, that we need to change our policy. One of the things that we have done is to help the population, civil population, more than 250,000 civilian people living in the Quneitra region, people that educated centuries to hate state of Israel, people that didn't know Israelis, but they've been born and educated to hate us. But we began with evacuated traumatic injuries from the war, people that their homes or schools has been bombed and they were severely injured. We are evacuated to Israel, more than 4,500 citizens. And then we've increased it and we've treated more than 1,400 children suffering from diseases, chronic diseases. We've evacuated them also to Israel. We've opened for them a day care clinic eastern to the fence, treated more than 8,000 Syrian people, civilians, men, women, and children. We provide them tons of food, clothes, baby powder milk, diesel, and all kinds of humanitarian aid to help them to survive their toughest years.
What impact did it have on them?
When you first met them on the fence, you have seen faces that people are fearing from you because they do not know what to expect. They have been told that Israel in the last years is helping them, but a person that never been and never seen Israel is coming to the fence with his little child. And let me tell you, it's very hard sights to see 3-4 years old children coming to the fence without shoes, with dirty clothes, with fear in their eyes. And then when you collect them on the border and take them to the hospital and give them to eat something, and then you see the smile of the children, you can understand that you are doing something good for people, from people to people.
What about some of the NGOs like Frontier Alliance International and Friendships? What role did they play?
The NGOs, Israelis NGOs and Americans NGOs like the FAI and the Friendships Unlimited took a very important part in this project. They have brought us the opportunity to reach the people. For example, the Friendships Unlimited, they have built a daycare clinic eastern to the fence. We cannot do this. They worked there, they were living there for almost a year and take care for 8,000 civilians. Those 8,000 civilians were our civil ambassadors inside Syria. The FAI guys, those wonderful teams, they were living in 2 villages in Syria, treating day by day the locals. And just think for yourselves how crazy it might have been heard Israeli Jews helping Christians to help Muslims. I don't think that it has never happened in the world. Here in the Good Neighboring Project, it happened.
How did you make the connection between the people on the other side of the border?
There was telephones that we provide them, my number. I think that they've been understand that we are here to help locals, between the doctors, between the nurses, between the civilians that called me and asked for me help in another region that wants some help, another village that want to get some medical help, some food help, whatever they want, we had the opportunity to provide.
Why did it stop?
It has been stopped because the Assad regime conquered again this area, and now the regime is here. He must take care for the population, and now in the state you cannot work with the Syrian side. They will not allow you to do this.
What does this say about the Israeli army?
I didn't heard about armies in the world that actually risk the life of their soldiers in order to help their enemies. And this is exactly what we've done night by night, sometimes 2 or 3 times in every night. We have risked our life opening the fence, the security fence between Israel and Syria.
Do you think it will have a lasting impact?
Those people that we have saved their life, they will not be able to forget it. Even another year or 2, they will tell this story of the IDF and the State of Israel help for centuries ahead. So even if they will not wave the flags of Israel on the Quneitra region in those days, deep in their hearts, they will know that Israel helps them, and they will speak this story to their families and relatives.
You're getting out of the IDF in a few weeks. How do you feel in your heart about what you've done here?
Enormous project, amazing project. And it was a unique thing to do, to see your enemy faces laughing, smiling, and say to you thank you, in Arabic of course. And I think that this is an amazing end of serving 24 years in my country.
Coming up, a new documentary remembers the heroic resistance of Jews in the infamous Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. On International Holocaust Remembrance Day, this coming January 27th, a new documentary called Who Will Write Our History will be shown worldwide. The film by Nancy Spielberg tells the stories of Jews who died in the Warsaw Ghetto, using secret testimonies and stories they left behind hidden in the ghetto. Here's a clip from our interview with Spielberg.
A group of people that saw the writing on the wall. They knew they would not survive, most likely, the Warsaw Ghetto. And they said, if we do not collect and write our histories, our history will be written by the Germans and we will no longer exist. And they gathered up diaries and they wrote journals and they had children write essays and they had poems and recipes and every aspect of life and death in the Warsaw Ghetto. And then they wrote their last will and testimonies and they buried these in milk cans and tin boxes, literally as the Germans were pounding on the door. And after the war, only 3 people from this secret group survived, and they went back through the rubble and tried to find where was the cellar under all of the rubble. They found 2, one is still buried, and unearthed these documents. And it's incredible because it's like finding 50 Anne Frank diaries. And the world knows Anne Frank, and if the world knew anything of the Holocaust before Schindler's List, it was probably from the diary of Anne Frank.
It looks like it will be a powerful and profound testament to those who bravely faced the might of the German army. It's also a reminder to pray for the Jewish people, who even today still face enemies on every side, from Iran to the BDS movement. And please pray for leaders like President Trump, who are making major decisions that affect so many people here in the region. Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.